Property values. You need real estate advice? Buy near public transit. New public transit development, construction, or new service contributes to higher real estate values. Real estate of any kind that is located in close proximity to public transit is more highly valued. We've seen this across cities in the United States and Canada, whether it's Toronto or Vancouver, or developments in Winnipeg, or in the west coast of Florida. We regularly see that when a city or municipality or regional agency decides to develop a new bus rapid transit line or a new rail line, property values increase around it. In fact, in Cleveland, which recently built their Healthline BRT, an average dollar spent on public transit returned in value $114. It's a 1 to 114 value creation, and much of that was in new residential and office space and real estate value. In fact, the Center for Transit-Oriented Development found that proximity to high-capacity transit, this is rail lines or articulated buses, high-capacity transit can improve real estate values by up to 150%. We see here several cities broken down: Boston, Chicago, the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area in Minnesota, Phoenix in Arizona, San Francisco, and then all regions across the United States. You see, the blue represents the transit shed. This is an area where transportation is accessible, usually within a quarter mile. And then you'll see in red the non-transit areas. Above zero represents the high value, and below zero represents lower value. So you'll see here in Boston, for example, home values in transit shed have increased by 120%, whereas those not in transit areas have actually decreased. We see the same trend across every city. While in places like Minneapolis or Phoenix, the drop in value among houses not in transit areas hasn't been significant, you'll still see that these historically car-centered cities saw massive increases in housing value near public transit. And this isn't coincidence. Each of these cities has recently invested in either new transit lines and service or started the proposal process for developing new transit lines and new bus service. Public transit not only increases housing value, but it decreases income inequality. Households closer to transit have better access to jobs and lower average transportation costs. When you spend less on transportation or you have more ready access to a job that pays well, you're less likely to suffer from the income gap. A recent study by Harvard University found that families living in areas with a shorter average commute time had a better shot of moving up the economic ladder than those living in areas with longer commute times. In most American cities that have been facing gentrification, you'll see a huge push of traditionally low-income urban cores reversing, with higher income, usually younger residents, usually whiter residents moving in, and lower income, usually non-white residents being forced into the suburbs. The result has been that those who are already facing issues with economic access and economic opportunity, access to jobs, or with the cost of living, have now been put in areas where transit has historically been thinner or not present at all. We're talking about suburbs. What the Harvard study tells us is that those who are now live in the city center where transportation is being developed or infill is happening, and that means new transit stops or new transit services being created, are actually going to be benefiting more and moving up the economic ladder faster. This is why it's so important that transit service not only focus on delivering to what they call choice riders, but to people who are transit dependent, including in the suburban areas of our cities. Otherwise, we are denying them access to jobs and we are increasing their average household costs. A study conducted by the University of Toronto found that homes near subway stations were worth on average $4,000 more than other homes in the area. So in the end, public transit not only increases the value of homes, but it also decreases the cost of living, which means if we can develop cities in a way that allows people to stay where they live, to benefit from the increase in value from new transit lines, and then to use those new transit lines to get access to jobs and reduce their overall transportation costs, we can begin to resolve income inequality issues, and we can ensure that we're building cities that are better for everybody.